What's going on, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of the 6 months to SOC challenge. If you're new here, I'm BTuff and I'm documenting my journey from a student to a SOC analyst within 6 months. Every single week I'm learning something new, and every single week I'm going to be right here sharing it with you. Alright, picture this. You're a SOC analyst chilling, working the graveyard shift, and you're just swifting through logs, and all of a sudden, your SIEM starts screaming at you, saying there's a critical alert. It says 3 user accounts got locked out, all from the same internal IP from password attempts, and on top of that, it's successfully logged into an admin account at 2:47 a.m. while you're working this graveyard shift. So we're thinking someone's probably brute forcing accounts on our network and they somehow got into an admin account. We need to check this out and investigate right away so we can get to the bottom of this and remediate the situation. So right away, just with the information we know, we can pretty much assume that somebody's breached our network. So right away, we would go ahead and block this internal IP and completely isolate it. And then do everything in our power from the firewall to the network port on the machine to completely isolate it and not allow it to do any more damage into our network. That user account that it somehow got into will no longer be able to contact our Active Directory or do much when it's completely isolated. Now let's go ahead and do some deeper investigation now that this machine has been isolated. To start our investigation, we're going to go ahead and run some PowerShell scripts to cross-reference some of the things the SIEM were telling us and get more information so that we can act upon it. So first things first, we're running this script getAdUser-identityAdmin. We're essentially just asking for the admin user and then asking for properties that will help us in our investigation. And then so like things like the last logon date, if the account is locked out, if the account has been modified, if the password expired, and the last time the password was set. So looking at some of these here, first things first, we see the last logon was at 2:47 a.m. Let's write that down in our findings so that we can get some of these things in our report when we decide to conclude that a attacker is breached or whatever we decide to conclude. User logged on at 2:47 a.m. outside of usual business hours. Next up, let's look at the locked out, and the account is not locked out, so that tells us that the attacker got in, because we know if the account's not locked out, obviously the brute force attack must have worked unlike the other accounts he was trying to get into. So next thing up here, let's check the modified query, and then it was modified just a few minutes after it was logged in. So the attacker has done something. The attacker did get in and he was able to do something in the period of time between when I was able to isolate the machine and when he logged in. So 2:52 attacker AM attacker modified admin user. And then let's check out the password expired. So the password was not expired and the password was last set on 9/15/2025, which is not in correlation with when the attacker got in. So we know that the attacker didn't change, or attacker most likely didn't change, the admin user's password. I go to actions to take, and right away we should go ahead and disable the admin user, because obviously the attackers got in, it seems, and we don't want him to leverage any of the, I couldn't think of the word, sorry, the permissions is what I was trying to say. We don't want the attacker to leverage any of the permissions that he has so that he can do more malicious things in our network. So to disable the account, we're going to go ahead and run the disable AD account -ID admin so that we can go ahead and disable the admin account so the attacker can't find other ways to potentially get in and use the admin account while we're investigating. Now for step 2 in our investigation, let's go ahead and check if there's any more accounts that were locked out that are potentially in correlation with the attacker that got into the admin account. So first we're going to run this PowerShell command, search AD account -locked out. This essentially looks for any AD accounts that are locked out, and it grabs the name, whether or not it's locked out, and the last logon date. So first things first, we see that these 3 users, all in the same day, sort of within the same time frame, all got locked out then. So, and then didn't catch the J there. So all locked out within the same day and the same 3 hours. And this could potentially be the same attacker, maybe doing some early reconnaissance before he decided to try and get in at 2:40 a.m. at night. But we can go ahead and investigate that by checking if all of these were by the same IP address and things of that nature. But more importantly, these accounts were locked out around the same time frame that the admin user got logged in. So we know this probably has correlation with that admin user. So we're going to go ahead and write that down. Attacker tried to brute force these 3 accounts as well. And the SIEM didn't seem to flag these ones, and this clearly shows that the attacker must have been doing his homework and must have had some reconnaissance before trying to brute force these accounts. Because if we go on our timeline so far, we have 241, 243, 245, and we got the admin account that got logged into at 2:47 a.m. So we know that the attacker was doing this kind of in succession. So we know he's just been trying to get into accounts, and we need to go ahead and take some action to all these other accounts. So now with everything we have, we know that the attacker tried to get into a few accounts at least tonight, and they also knew about the backup admin account, which means they could have potentially had some insider knowledge. So for now, we know we're going to take some actions like document locked out accounts and potentially see if there are any reasons these were targeted. And then lastly, we know the attacker did some recon because he found these accounts, and he also found out about the admin backup account. So we can learn more potentially about the threat that we're dealing with, and also we can go ahead and check out and document whether or not these accounts were purposely targeted. For example, like the admin backup, and then the next account that was targeted was the admin account in general. Now let's move on to step 3 of the investigation, where we look at what type of privileges and permissions the user had when he was inside of this admin account. So we're going to first run a PowerShell command that's going to essentially grab the group memberships or the security groups that the admin user was in. And we see he was in domain users, domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, group policy creator owners, and administrators. And this right away just tells us that we need to contact the incident response team immediately. Because if you know what a lot of these typical groups do, being in all of these essentially lets you pretty much do anything inside of the AD, from having full admin access to accessing any computer or file, creating and deleting users through multiple domains if you have trusts between other domains. And especially as a schema admin, you can modify the Active Directory schema itself, which this essentially makes you have to kind of completely clean up the Active Directory. You might even need to make a whole new AD from scratch, because the amount of things that you can do to create persistence as an attacker, maybe hiding data here and there, changing the complete structure of the Active Directory. With these permissions, he could have completely deleted the AD if the attacker wanted to. This is very dangerous, and it completely compromises the CIA triad, and this puts the severity of the attack on the highest level we possibly could. Now let's go ahead and document the actions we're going to take. First things first, we're going to contact the incident response team right away and let them know that we have a very, very critical compromise in our network. And then we're going to check if there are any schema modifications. And this will check if, like I was saying earlier, the structure of the blueprint of our Active Directory was modified in any sort of way, so we can investigate what they did and potentially if we do need to completely restart and reset our Active Directory. And then lastly, we are going to consider all credentials compromised. I can spell. There we go. And just because since the attacker already had full domain access, we might as well rather be safe than sorry. And let's go ahead and move on to step 4. Now that we've asked the incident response team for help, we still have more questions and want to investigate more. Let's give them a hand and check out what did the attacker actually do while he was in the admin account. So we're going to run a PowerShell query to figure this out. We're going to use getAdUser, and this whole query essentially just checks what accounts were modified during this day or past this day, and we can see that the admin user, SVC backup, and IT support came back. And I recognize this account, but I've never seen this IT support account before. And this tells me right away this could be a potential backup account. We already know the admin account was modified at 252, but the SVC backup, we also don't know what could have been done there. They could have also used this account for potential persistence and backdoors, maybe added them to groups and done more malicious things to find ways to break that CIA triad any way that they can. So, in our findings, we built an attack timeline so that we can see just pretty much what we know so far. And we know at 241, the brute force began and a few different accounts got locked out. And then at 247, the admin account got compromised and that was a breach. And then after that, the admin account was modified. We still don't know what they specifically did. The SVC service account got modified. We still don't know what they specifically did there either, but at least we know the accounts that got modified. An IT support account got modified. And I'm not 100% sure, but I've never seen this account before, so it could be a potential backdoor account that the attacker created for persistence. So for the actions we're going to take now, we definitely know we want to disable the SVC backup account. We know we want to disable the IT support account. And we're going to further investigate what was done on these accounts so that we can figure out potentially if they created any backdoors, any ways for persistence, and overall just get a good grasp of what the attacker actually was doing and what they wanted while they were in our network. All right, now after everything, we've built an investigation summary, so let's talk through it and then see what our next steps are. So we know an attacker conducted a brute force attack against multiple accounts. After several failed attempts, we know they got into the admin account at 2:47 a.m. and within 8 minutes they modified at least 3 accounts, likely creating persistence mechanisms. We don't know exactly what happened because we haven't had a lot of time to completely investigate each of these accounts, but we do know they've been modified, and that's typically one of the first things the attackers like to establish so that they can have a way back in because they know that we probably could get notified right away, isolate the machine, and try and get them out as soon as possible. So next thing, we're checking the severity, and we know this is critical. I would honestly change this to very critical because just the sheer amount of access they had, they could have pretty much done anything. So we know that we need to take care of this as soon as possible and figure out our next steps. And then the accounts affected, we know the admin account got compromised and we disabled that. The SVC backup account got modified, we disabled that. And then the IT support that I've never seen before got compromised and disabled. And I'm also going to put potential backdoor account. Oh, no, it's at the front of it. Jeez. Yeah, so the IT support account also is the suspected backdoor because we've never seen it before. That got disabled as well. Mike Chen, Lisa Park, and the admin backup account also got locked out during the attack, and we still don't know what the root cause is. We're investigating how we got in, but we do know that workstation 192.168.1.47 was the initial culprit and where all of this was coming from, and that is a workstation in our internal network. One of the first things we think as security professionals is it a potential phishing attack? Because phishing attacks are one of the most common ways that attackers get into networks. They are, I believe, the #1 way that attackers actually find their way in. So let's go check out the users of the people who have been accessing that workstation's emails and see if they potentially fell for any phishing attacks. Now, after further investigation, we found one particular user using that specific IP address that the attacker compromised. And we see that he opened this earlier in the day. And this is just an example. Obviously, the dates are completely off, but we're using this scenario to just demonstrate how a SOC analyst would be able to correlate all this information and figure out what is the root cause of the attack in the first place. So let's say we figure out that this all happened in the same day. And looking at this email, we know that this is someone that claims to be Amazon saying that the account has been locked and they need them to contact some sort of number to unfreeze their account immediately using things like urgency here and there. And we can also see that there's some grammatical errors here, like for example, password in 2 words, or after you've been verified your account will be reactivated within 24 hours. That's not how you spell within. If we don't hear from you in 3 days, the charges on your your account will be non-refundable. Also here, the hear from you, this should be HEAR. That's not the right here in this context. And also the biggest red flag is the domain name. We can see that this is the domain name, this 013802mail.com is what came through here, which tells us that this isn't Amazon's typical mail server. Amazon's mail server would typically be something like some sort of subdomain in amazon.com. It would just typically be amazon.com. And this clearly is just using a random sort of email or email service to contact them. So we can clearly identify this email as most likely phishing. And after doing a little bit more investigation, we can find that maybe the user on this account called this number, gave them some sort of credentials that allowed them to get into our network and do some further damage to our network. So let's go ahead and go back and see some of the remediation we can do, because right away we know that employee needs some security awareness. All right, and now we created this mini remediation checklist to see how we can go ahead and recover from this attack. So first things first, the immediate stuff we've already done earlier in the attack process by isolating the machine, disabling compromised accounts, and these are some of them that we disabled, and then escalating this to the incident response team because of how critical the impact was of this attack. And here are some short-term things that we need to go ahead and make sure we do to continue our remediation process, like resetting all the passwords for the admin's account, because we know that honestly all credentials should possibly be reset after we just check everything and learn everything that's probably been modified. And also based off of that, we might need to do a complete wipe of the Active Directory because of just the sheer amount of access the attacker had. So we're going to review all the privileged groups, the privileged group memberships, by just seeing if anyone new got added to these things and things of that nature, to see if the attacker left some persistence mechanisms to get back in our network even after we try and implement some of these remediation techniques. And then we're going to look for more persistence sort of across the Active Directory and network by looking if they scheduled any tasks, maybe another user to be created and having certain permissions and things of that nature. Maybe he created some services to start up, some malware that he put in there, or any sort of startup scripts that would do anything malicious before we know it. We're going to analyze that workstation for more malware just to see if he installed anything that would give him more backdoors and or persistence. And then we would interview the workstation interview the user of that workstation to double check if that phishing attack 100% is how the attacker got in. And then lastly, we would check not lastly, these don't really have an order, but we would check the email logs for phishing attempts, which we just did, and which is what we're kind of locking in on for now. Long-term lessons learned: we should implement multi-factor authentication for all admin accounts because we just can't take the risk. It'll take a little bit longer to authenticate, but this was a very, very critical breach, and this could have potentially costed us our entire Active Directory. And then we need to reduce the number of Schema Admin members because having so many just kind of increases our attack surface. And as we learned today, it's really, really bad if an attacker finds a way to have access to a Schema Admin member. And then security awareness training, especially for phishing and especially on the user that fell for the phishing attack, because we need to have our users become another part of our defense, not someone or something that gets exploited. And then lastly, we're going to review and reduce privileged access across the domain because we just need to implement that principle of least privilege because it will overall just reduce our attack surface and not allow, for example, someone to get into one account and find a way into an admin account, or get into one workstation and find ways to get into other accounts that have lots of permissions that allow them to do more. And then lastly, we're going to implement better monitoring for off-hours admin logins, because as we can see, it seems that attackers are coming for our network when we are not there, when there's just SOC analysts working the graveyard shifts like me. We need better potentially automated things or more people working the night shift so that we can fend these attackers off who are doing some late night hunts. So that's our remediation list, and that concludes our little lab and analysis here of looking through a potential phishing attack that caused a attacker to almost completely compromise our network. And I will see you in the next clip. Now, real quick, I'm going to be completely honest with y'all. I had to take a little bit of time off last week because finals week was hitting me, Thanksgiving was a lot, and overall I was falling a little bit behind, so I just had to take a step back and get my hold back on things. Though, the challenge continues and we are back and fully locked in. And for a recap of today, we walked through a full incident response scenario. From detection to containment to investigation, all the way to the root cause analysis and remediation. Next week, we're going deeper into phishing analysis, so stay tuned because it's going to be really fun. If you're on your own SOC journey or overall have any questions about cybersecurity, drop a comment down below because I'm responding to every single one and I want to hear your thoughts. If you got any value from this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any of these videos weekly. I have deeper and technical breakdowns of these videos on my personal blog that's going to be at btuffsecurity.com. Go ahead and check that out in the description down below. And that's it for week 3. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Be tough.